Title: Legacy Redefined. Zora Hamilton stepped into the marble-floored sanctuary of Elon Beauty and Cosmetics, unaware that her quiet afternoon of skincare shopping would ignite a revolution. Her crisp cashmere sweater hugged her figure with understated elegance, her natural hair coiled into a neat bun, and her feet carried her on Italian-made flats that whispered luxury without flaunting it. She was there for one purpose: to buy a new serum before that evening's high-profile gala. But she was black, and in the eyes of Alexander Drayton, the store's manager, that meant something else entirely. The moment Zora entered the Fifth Avenue flagship, she felt the shift in the air. Staff floated by her without acknowledgement. 3 white women who entered moments after her were greeted by name, escorted to champagne consultations, and ushered into velvet-lined VIP rooms. Zora, standing near a $5,000 skincare set, was scrutinized like a trespasser. Alexander, with his silver hair and cold blue eyes, approached with a condescending smile. "Can I help you find the exit?" he asked, his voice dripping with venom masquerading as civility. When Zora expressed interest in purchasing the entire limited edition collection, he scoffed. "These items cost more than you make in a year. We don't do handouts here. People like you don't belong in Elon." Security didn't wait for further instruction. 2 large guards gripped Zora's arms and dragged her to the door, ignoring her calm insistence to leave on her own. Cameras caught every moment. Shoppers watched. Some snickered. Others filmed. Alexander stood smugly behind the glass, arms crossed, pride swelling in his chest. But he had no idea who he had just humiliated. Zora Hamilton wasn't just another shopper. She was the wife of Julian Hamilton, a tech billionaire whose name caused Wall Street to pause. But more than that, Zora was a woman forged in resilience. Born to Haitian immigrants in Brooklyn, she had earned scholarships to Columbia and Harvard, worked tirelessly to build her own brand, and remained grounded through it all. Minutes after the incident, she called Julian. "Julian," she said, her voice steady, "you won't believe what just happened." Julian didn't rant. He didn't scream. But in his silence, decisions were made. That night, while Zora attended the gala, Julian activated his legal and acquisitions team. By dawn, Elon Beauty was no longer under the control of its original board. At precisely 9:58 a.m. the following morning, a sleek Rolls-Royce pulled up outside the store. Zora stepped out in a tailored white suit, her posture regal. Julian followed in quiet authority. Behind them arrived 4 Escalades and a dozen business professionals bearing folders embossed with the Hamilton Group logo. Inside, Alexander watched in confusion, then horror. By 10 a.m., the doors opened. Zora entered first. "Welcome to Elon Beauty," Alexander said, extending a trembling hand. Zora didn't take it. Julian stepped beside her. "I believe you met my wife yesterday," he said, voice cool but commanding. As the staff watched in stunned silence, one of Julian's aides handed Alexander a thick folder. "What is this?" he asked. "Ownership transfer papers," the aide replied. As of 4:30 a.m., the Hamilton Group is the majority shareholder of the parent company. The staff gasped. Phones buzzed in pockets. Reality was dawning. Julian addressed the store. "Yesterday, my wife was publicly humiliated. She was profiled, insulted, and dragged out like a criminal. Not only is that unacceptable, it reflects a toxic culture rooted in exclusion. That ends today." He turned to Alexander. "You're fired. Effective immediately," Alexander pleaded. "Mentioned years of service, a mortgage, children." Zora finally spoke. "You didn't need to know who I was to treat me with dignity. You chose prejudice. And now, you live with the consequence." Elon was shut down for restructuring. All 50 global locations closed. Staff were given severance or an opportunity to reapply under new guidelines. Zora led the transformation personally, redesigning the brand from the ground up. 6 months later, the Fifth Avenue store reopened as Legacy. Gone were the marble walls of intimidation. The atmosphere was warm, inclusive, and diverse. Staff wore badges indicating not just names, but the languages they spoke. Luxury hadn't been diluted, it had been redefined. Zora, now creative director, launched the Legacy New Designers Initiative, mentoring creators from underrepresented communities. One of them, Bethany, a former associate who had tried to speak up on the day of Zora's humiliation, now sold her own skincare line at Legacy, based on ancestral Jamaican recipes. Meanwhile, across town, Alexander Drayton stood behind the counter at a budget cosmetics chain, wearing a red vest. A young black woman asked about foundation shades, and he answered with strained politeness. The industry had learned, and so had he. Legacy grew into the first black-owned luxury retail empire, with record profits, a diverse leadership team, and a customer base that reflected the real world. From the ashes of exclusion, Zora and Julian built a future where luxury meant access, not alienation. And they never looked back. 6 months later, during Fashion Week, Legacy held its first global symposium titled Luxury with Purpose. Industry leaders flew in from Paris, Milan, Seoul, and Tokyo to understand the force behind the brand that was disrupting the very fabric of high-end retail. Zora stood at the podium, facing a sea of powerful executives, influencers, and press. "You don't have to destroy tradition to evolve it," she said. "You have to be brave enough to tell the truth and kind enough to make space for others at the table." Midway through her speech, a voice echoed from the back of the hall. Alexander, dressed in an ill-fitted suit, stepped forward, his face pale. "May I speak?" The room tensed. Security moved, but Zora raised her hand. She nodded once. Alexander swallowed. "I came here today not to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want to say, I see now what I never saw then. That I was wrong." A pause. "You taught me something I never thought I'd learn. Not from lectures, not from punishments. From watching what you built when you had every reason to burn everything down." Zora nodded slowly. The room remained silent, but not hostile. "Legacy isn't about what happened to me," she said. "It's about what we do now with the power we hold. Even you, Alexander. What you do next matters." He lowered his eyes. Security gently let him out. But the moment landed. Later that night, Zora stood at the rooftop of Legacy's flagship store, watching the city lights pulse below. Julian stepped beside her, glass of wine in hand. "You could have crushed him," he said quietly. "I did," Zora replied, "but in the way that teaches him to never stand in another woman's way again." Legacy wasn't just a brand. It was a new standard, and the world would never forget the woman who redefined it.